Happy you could come along. We are joined, as always, by Greg Engert, beer director for the Neighborhood Restaurant Group, a food and wine sommelier of the year. The group includes Evening Star Cafe and Planet Wine in the Delray neighborhood, also Vermilion and Columbia Firehouse in Old Town. Greg, it is always good to see you.
Good to see you too.
What is on tap this week?
So this week, I'm really excited to showcase. This is a brand new brewery for the area called Off Color Brewing, and it's from Chicago, Illinois, and it's a good friend of ours, a guy by the name of John Laffler, who along with Dave Bleitner opened this brewery, I think just about a year ago in Chicago. And John is from the area. He's from Virginia. And his sister, Mary Jo, actually still lives locally, and she comes into the restaurants and stuff. And anytime John's in town visiting the family for the holidays and such, he comes by. Church Key, now Blue Jacket, things like that. We've talked about doing a Blue Jacket off-color beer at some point, but he's a great guy. And John and Dave, they actually met back in 2008. They were at, well, they both went to the Siebel Institute to study brewing in Chicago. They both were kind of going to go different directions, and then just said, we love beer, let's go and learn. They met there, they interned at Metropolitan Brewing Company, and that's where they started to think about what would one day become Off Color. So going back to 2008 with that. John ended up at Goose Island for many years, primarily working with their barrels and bugs, and Dave ended up with Two Brothers Brewing Company outside of Chicago, and so eventually they got it all together to open Off Color in the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago. And
good for them.
They're making great stuff. They're a tiny brewery that has chosen to go the way of some of these other really cool tiny breweries like like Stillwater, Evil Twin, and Prairie, Crooked Stave, where Jolly Pumpkin actually was one of the early ones to do this, where since they're not making a lot of beer, they've decided that they're going to concentrate on their home market and then go through importers to send their small amounts of their beer throughout the country. So you'll see off-color beer popping up in this area in small amounts, but pretty consistently based on that model. What they do at off-color, they do a lot of stuff. They're really adventurous. But a lot of their beers are based on historic recipes and styles, and then they add their own interpretation. So Troublesome is one of their kind of standard flagships. It is a Goza, which is an old Germanic style of tart wheat beer, kind of like Berliner Weiss, but with more body, typically brewed with coriander and with salt. It gives it a slight briny effervescence in the finish.
Okay.
This was a good one.
Just smells refreshing. I can smell the salt too, I think, unless I'm imagining
coriander.
it, which is possible.
Yeah.
That'll do on a hot summer day, all right.
It's great, isn't it?
It's very good.
And you get this really great interplay of acidity and brine in the finish. It's really cool. So how they make this is they make actually a pretty uninteresting base wheat beer, wheat ale. And then on the side, they make a really soured blonde ale that they ferment or they inoculate exclusively with lactobacillus, the bacteria that creates lactic acid, so it makes pickles taste like pickles and yogurt taste tangy, ferment salami. And so they get this really sour, kind of funky blonde ale, and then they blend it into their base wheat beer until they get that perfect balance of crisp, refreshing, weedy grain quality and acidity. And at that point, too, is when they're adding their salt and their coriander. So they add it towards the finish. You do get some aroma of coriander and salt, weedy grain, and then a really cool, sour, salty, almost umami-like finish as well.
But it's not overly salty, and
No,
it's not sour and really not really sour and funky either. So not to put anyone off about that.
It's really
like that a lot.
really well done, classic style.
What would you pair it with? Immediately, oysters on the half shell came to mind.
Yeah,
I mean,
ceviche too. I mean, the cool thing is it's got enough acidity. Acid and acid mellow each other out. So if you do this with like a simple salad with vinaigrette, it's going to be fantastic. You're adding the coriander spice, you're bringing in some weedy kind of croutons, you're refreshing the whole thing, and the acidity gets more complex when this hits that vinaigrette. Same thing with like a ceviche. You're giving it a little bit of seasoning, and then the acidity becomes more complex when the ceviche sourness hits the tartness of the beer. But then, yeah, acid mellows out salt, just like in the beer. So oysters on the half shell, steamed clams, Maryland crabs. You know, leave the Old Bay aside, this coriander is going to come in and kind of do the trick for you. So.
Okay. Greg, thank you as always.
Thank you.
Everyone, always, please do drink responsibly and be sure to bring your thirst next time for another Beer of the Week.